We know Tennessee's going to be a preseason ranked football team heading into the fall, but where exactly should Tennessee be ranked in the top 25? Well, the post-spring ESPN rankings have Tennessee at a certain spot, and I think it's a little too low, especially with one of Tennessee's opponents ranked 2 slots higher. That and more to Tuesday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Vols. I am your host, Eric Kane. Appreciate you for being here, making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every single day. Shout out every dayers. Couldn't do this show without you, and we'll answer some of your mailbag questions in segment number 3 of the show. We're going to go over that ESPN post-spring practice top 25 and where Tennessee is found inside that top 25. Is it too high, too low, or just about right? I think it's too low. And some of the opponents that Tennessee is going to face on the 2024 schedule, one of which, non-conference, is a couple of slots ahead. And I think you can go ahead and put process to elimination and know who I'm talking about. That's coming up here in a matter of seconds. And then in segment number 2, we're going to go over the Tennessee baseball players who are on the postseason all-SEC teams for the conference and why Christian Moore deserves just so much better. That and a whole lot more. It is your Tuesday Locked On Vols. You can watch us, you can view us, download us, listen to us, subscribe to us, all that and more wherever you get your podcast, and of course on the Locked On Vols YouTube channel. So Tennessee is ranked at number 15 in the post-spring practice top 25 rankings per ESPN. Again, it's list season. We're in the month of May, guys. We're going to get through it together because if you close your eyes, man, the football season is going to be here before you know it. But right now, we just got to talk about where we think everybody is going into the football season. And ESPN thinks Tennessee is the 15th best team in the country heading into the 2024 season. This is a little spring update. This is from ESPN. That's what they have to say about Tennessee. The Volunteers' high-flying passing attack slowed down a bit in 2023, going from number 1 in FBS in scoring at 46 points per game in 2022 to 35th last season with 31.8 points per game. Obviously, that has got to be rectified for sure. And how about we're in an era in football right now where you score 31 points a game and you're 35th in the country? That's kind of mind-blowing. Back to what ESPN says. With highly regarded passer Nico Iamaleava taking over, things should start trending back in the right direction. Transfer receiver Chris Brazzell from Tulane, freshman Mike Matthews might take some attention away from Squirrel White and Brew McCoy, who's also coming back from a fractured right ankle. They caused him to miss most of 2023. LSU transfer Lance Hurd was working as the number 1 left tackle in spring and should solidify a unit with 3 returning starters. The Vols defensive line, led by James Pierce, should be its strength, and it will have to be very good for a rebuilding secondary. Tennessee plays an early non-conference test against NC State and the road games at Oklahoma and Georgia with Alabama at home. If Iamaleava is as good as advertised, the Vols might be back in the playoff hunt. End quote. Okay, I mean, I can get on board with a little bit of everything that was written right there. It still just makes me so... It still just humors me so much whenever I read stuff like, the Tennessee Volunteers air raid offense under Josh Heupel, the high-flying passing attack under Josh Heupel. Absolutely. You let it rip, as Joey Halsey would say, Tennessee's offensive coordinator. But, again, from the outside, you just think Tennessee throws it every single play. And we know here, because we're everydayers, and, of course, we know Tennessee football like the back of our hand. We know how important this run game is for Josh Heupel and the Tennessee Volunteers. But good points here. I mean, Nico saying if he's as good as advertised, Tennessee should be in the playoff hunt. That's what we talked about on this show all offseason long. Tennessee, even with 2 losses potentially, if you finish 10-2 in the regular season, you should be in contention for a playoff spot because that means you have beaten one of 3 potential playoff teams in Oklahoma, in not Florida, Alabama, and in Georgia. And, of course, you've got some other wins on that schedule that'll be pretty good to have on the resume when it's all said and done. So, yeah, if Nico is the real deal, Tennessee should very much be in place for a college football playoff push. Talking about the wide receivers, the addition of Chris Brazzell, Mike Matthews, the best wide receiver this spring, and even listed here, and that's Dante Thornton, James Pierce, Lance Hurd, all that stuff. It sounds really, really good. Well, where does Tennessee rank among SEC teams who are ranked inside the top 25 here? Tennessee is 7th. Tennessee is the 7th highest ranked SEC team in the top 25 here for ESPN. And So that means 7 of the top 15 hail from the Southeastern Conference. You have LSU right in front of Tennessee at 14. Tennessee's actually right in front of Clemson, not an SEC team, but Clemson there at 16. But it's Tennessee at 15, LSU at 14. I'm looking at SEC teams. Missouri at number 8, Alabama at 7, Ole Miss at number 6, Texas is number 3, and then, of course, Georgia is at number 1. I don't have much issue with some of these up here. I think Georgia, Ohio State's got to figure out, it's got to, welcoming in a new quarterback, of course, but, with all the bells and whistles and everything that Ryan Day has to work with, I think Ohio State's going to be just fine. Texas is, set to reload. I saw a headline, I think it was at CBS Sports on Tuesday or on Monday, that said it's national championship or bust for Texas. And kind of like, I won't say bust, because if you go and, you make the playoffs, win a couple of games, you have a really good season, you win the conference, potentially, say Texas wins the conference or whatever. I just thought about Texas coming from the Big 12, and I'm like, wait a minute, Texas is now in the SEC, so sure, Texas can win the conference, but I had to slow my roll there a moment. Point is, it's kind of like Tennessee last year in basketball. Tennessee had such a great year, but all the pieces were in place to go win a natty. You know what I'm saying? You had the score. You had the elite guy. You played good defense. You had a game breaker in Zakai Ziegler. You had front court presence and an all-SEC guy in Jonas Adu. Yes, I understand he left. We hate him now, yada, 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 from Seinfeld, yada, yada, yada. But he was an all-SEC player this year. I know he didn't play well in the tournament, but he was an all-SEC player this year. Toby Awaki gave you, some great minutes, Shabbat Meshack, so on and so forth, Josiah Jordan-James, Santiago Vesco, but we can go on and on and on. My point is, Tennessee was a really good basketball team, had a great season, nothing to hang your head over, but it was set up to go win a natty. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying this team next year can't go win a natty, but last year's team was set up to go do it. I saw a headline kind of saying the same things about Texas, the Longhorns this year, so I'll be intrigued to see kind of what they do. I had no issue with the top 3. Oregon at 4. Yeah, okay, checks out. Dan Lanning, and of course, Dylan Gabriel, what he's doing. Notre Dame at 5 is interesting, in my opinion. I think that's a little bit too high. You've got Alabama at 7. Ole Miss is in front of Alabama. It's the biggest experiment in college football, and I'm so intrigued to see how it works out. Of course, we can't deny the transfer portal additions that Lane Kiffin brought in there with Princely, that guy from Florida. Don't even try to pronounce his last name. You guys know me with names. Really good defensive end. Walter Nolan in the interior. Juice Wells at wide receiver. Jackson Dart is coming back. Alabama, you lose the GOAT in Nick Saban. Kind of cringe to say that, but let's real recognizes real, right? Nick Saban was great. But he goes on and you replace him with a guy that's just 104-12 in his last 3 stops and had a spot in the national championship game. There's going to be a learning curve there for sure, but Alabama's roster is still really, really good right now. Missouri at 8. Again, Missouri, like Ole Miss, I'm intrigued. Was Missouri a one-off last year? You do return Brady Cook. You return Luther Burden. You lose some guys on defense who are really good. You lose Cody Schrader in the backfield. I think Missouri might be a tick too high in my opinion, but you do have a quarterback and you do have a human highlight reel in Luther Burden, so that can take you a long way potentially. But I think Missouri's a little too high there at number 8. Michigan, the defending national champions, though, they've lost a ton, is at 10. Florida State's at 11. One team that's interesting, a couple of spots in front of Tennessee, is NC State. Again, I've had Tennessee winning this game the entire offseason. I'll probably have Tennessee winning this game, the week of. I'm not going to change my mind here. But I do recognize NC State's a pretty good ball club. This is what they have to say about NC State. Dave Doran has quietly guided the Wolfpack to 34 wins in the past 4 seasons, including a 9-4 mark last year, despite having a mess with the quarterback room. The position couldn't be a problem with former Coastal Carolina star Grayson McCall taking over the offense. He threw for at least 2,400 yards and 24 touchdowns and fewer than 3 interceptions in each of the 3 past seasons from 2020 to from 3 straight seasons from 2020 to 2022. McCall battled a head injury last season. He'll be surrounded by plenty of talent, including transfer receivers Noah Rogers from Ohio State, Wesley Grimes from Wake Forest, Casey Concepcion. He's coming back. He was there last year. ACC Rookie of the Year in 2023. You got Justin Jolly from UConn. We know that name in the transfer portal. He went to NC State. Jordan Waters from Duke is transferred there. They had a really, really good offseason, and they won games down the stretch, and they got a ton better at the quarterback position with Grayson McCall. But top to bottom talent-wise, I still can't imagine NC State being as good as what Tennessee is right now, in my opinion. Sure, you're more proven at quarterback, but I think you got the better quarterback here. Nobody on NC State's roster can get after the quarterback like James Pierce. Tennessee brings back a veteran and established offensive line for the most part. Best defensive line, in my opinion, in the country. Weapons on the outside. I'm curious why NC State is ranked in front of Tennessee here. And I'll be curious to see if that is where NC State is ranked, from here on out throughout the summer and on into preseason. Do we really think NC State is a top 15 team? I'll give you top 25, but a top 15 team, I'm not sure. I thought that was interesting there, having NC State a couple slots in front of Tennessee, and then LSU's right there in front of Tennessee. You do have a proven guy in Garrett Nussmeier. He's never been a full-time starter, but he's played a ton. But you are literally replacing your Heisman Trophy winner and two receivers who were fantastic, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. I'm intrigued to see how that kind of works. I think they're giving the benefit of the doubt a little bit there for Brian Kelly. But nonetheless, Tennessee's a top 15 team. I would have Tennessee slated closer to probably where NC State is, around 13. I'm not saying Tennessee should be a top 10 team right now, but a great starting point. As we know, this roster is built to go and win some football games right now, and I'm super excited to see the way that it transpires. I was talking with Brian via the DMs over the weekend. Appreciate you, Brian, for being an everyday. I'm pretty sure, if memory serves me correct, you live in Jeff County, maybe? I'm sure you'll tell me. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But nonetheless, we were having a good conversation about Dabo Swinney over the weekend, and he was like, I mean, hey, man, you can't call him a loser because of look what all he's accomplished. I'm like, yeah. I think my comments last week when I was talking about Dabo Swinney was more of he has such a loser mindset right now. And that's just my opinion, and that's fair if you guys have a different opinion. Saying, quite frankly, nobody's good enough out of the transfer portal to come play for me at Clemson. Get real. Are you serious right now? Okay, have fun being 9-4 again. Have fun being 8-4 and continuing to sprint downhill, in my opinion, there at Clemson. If you're Dabo Swinney. But nonetheless, this is Tennessee Volunteers podcast. Tennessee comes in at number 15 in the post-spring practice top 25 ESPN rankings. Is that too high? Is that too low? Or is that just about right? I would love to hear your thoughts on that at _Caner and at Locked On Vols. Hey, when we come back, we'll get into a little all-SEC baseball talk before we answer your mailbag questions. Coming up in segment number 3, that's what you have to look forward to as we continue on here with a Tuesday Locked On Vols. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to make sure that you find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just like any other job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who are not even actively searching for a new job, but might be open for the right role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn or not posting on LinkedIn, you're looking and posting in the wrong places. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses can get qualified candidates within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional. That's on LinkedIn Jobs because, hey, 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for their hiring process right now, and you should too. Post your job for free over at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. LinkedIn Jobs /lockedoncollege, where you can post your job for free. Terms and conditions, they do apply. Okay, so Tennessee well represented on the all-SEC baseball teams that were unveiled on Monday afternoon. Of course, we have a couple of snubs potentially, and we can debate this all day. And if you're not a baseball fan and you don't listen to the show for baseball, I hear you. Hang tight, about 9 minutes, and we'll get into some of the questions. We'll get back to football, but talking about real recognizing real earlier, right? I mean, Tennessee baseball is the number 1 team in the country. Tennessee baseball just won the SEC tournaments. The SEC regular season. Tennessee baseball is good. Tony Vitello is good. So if you're a Tennessee fan and you just casually watch the baseballs, that's fine. They deserve some talk. They deserve some recognition. It's the fastest growing sport on campus right now in terms of popularity, easily, and it has been since Tony Vitello has been here. What this team continues to do year after year in different ways under Tony Vitello has been super impressive. And now we're getting ready for the postseason. Later today at about 4:30 Eastern time, I believe, it'll be the 8th-seeded Vanderbilt Commodores and the 9th-seeded Florida Gators. They're going to play in the essentially a play-in game. Winner moves on to face Tennessee on Wednesday at 5:30 Eastern time. The loser goes home, and so we'll find out who Tennessee is going to play to begin the SEC tournament in Hoover, we'll know that later on tonight. But nonetheless, the awards, all SEC first team, second team, player of the year, newcomer of the year, all that type of stuff, coach of the year, all announced on Monday afternoon. In Tennessee, a pretty good showing. You had Christian Moore, second baseman, Dylan Dreiling, outfielder, first team All-SEC honorees. You had first baseman Blake Burke, outfielder Kavaris Tears, who were named to the second team All-SEC squad, and those two players, Burke and Tears, named to the All-Defensive SEC team. So congratulations to them. Dean Curley was named to the All-Freshman SEC team, and Drew Beam was named the Scholar Athlete of the Year for the Southeastern Conference. So that is that's awesome to see. So Christian Moore, just an unbelievable season. Anybody have this? I think I mentioned this on the show one time. One of those like little cell phone charger pads. Like I'm trying to put it on my pad right now, and like you gotta put it right in the right spot, or it's not going to charge your phone. I put it down over there on that pad a couple of times, that charging pad, and an hour later I looked and it didn't charge anything because I didn't have it specifically where it went. Anyway, Christian Moore, fantastic season. Moore, he won inside SEC play, the Triple Crown. We mentioned that on yesterday's show. He had a .429 batting average in 30 conference games, hitting 20 home runs, driving in 41. He tied Charlie Condon of Georgia, who went on to win the SEC Player of the Year award, no surprise, with the 41 RBIs in SEC play. But Christian Moore won the Triple Crown. I mean, that's distinction. That's historic. That is something that just doesn't always happen. Christian Moore is having an unbelievable season. So if we're talking about, again, SEC Player of the Year, where's the emphasis? Is it overall body of work where, mind you, Christian Moore is not too shabby either. 27 total home runs on the year, leading Tennessee with 64 runs scored. He's leading Tennessee with 60 RBI, totaling 181 bases. Slugging percentage at .454. Slugging percentage at .808. On base percentage at .454. Golden Spikes semifinalist, as is Blake Burke. We'll get to him in a moment. My point is, Christian Moore was fantastic. So if the SEC Player of the Year award truly is on, the merit should be based on 30 conference games, then why isn't Christian Moore being named the SEC Player of the Year right now? That's my question. And I don't think it's a huge disservice. I don't think it's just an absolute worst thing that's ever happened in sports history that he wasn't, because Charlie Condon deserves it. Charlie Condon's good. Jack Caglione deserves recognition. But all season long, it's been the conversation of Charlie Condon and Jack Caglione of Florida and Georgia battle. Nobody's even talking about Christian Moore. And the people that vote on this, I'm afraid, sent in their ballots before even the last weekend of the regular season, when Moore hit 3 more home runs and had 9 more hits or whatever. Christian Moore is just unbelievable. Dylan Dreiling, first team All-SEC pick as well. Nobody talks about him. The most underrated player on this roster, in my opinion. But 59 RBI, one shy of Christian Moore, .333 hitter in the everyday order, 17 home runs, 15 doubles. Let's see here. Just a really, really solid season. He had the third highest batting average as well in conference play at .333, and he hit 10 home runs in conference play, which is about 10 shy of Moore, who hit 20, but still the only other Vol to hit over 10 home runs, or at least 10 home runs in SEC play. So Dylan Dreiling, who is a draft-eligible sophomore, is the most underrated player on the roster. He's going to be drafted this summer. He's going to be gone, but he's been impactful this year for sure. So those two guys on the first team. Why didn't, say, Blake Burke make the first team? Well, he cooled a little bit towards the end of the season, as did Kavaris Tears, both those guys, but their overall body of work and still their numbers inside conference play deserving to be on the second team. But for Blake Burke, it was Jack Caglione who got the nod at first team first base, because when he's not pitching, he's playing first base. And so a couple of these snubs for Tennessee, is because Charlie Condon and Jack Caglione were nominated as a first baseman and a third baseman, respectively. So Charlie Condon, who's the SEC Player of the Year, he's the first team, guy at third base here. Well, that means because he's at third base instead of maybe first base or outfield or the utility spot, where in my opinion he should have been nominated for in the utility spot because he played a little all over. He played more games at third base, don't hear me wrong here, but he very easily could have been nominated at the utility spot. He could have taken that one. And if that were the case, then second team third baseman Tommy White of LSU could have been first team, and that would have opened up a spot for Billy Amick to be the second team third baseman. But because Condon was slated at third base, it bumped everybody down. Because Jack Caglione was slated at first base instead of DH, utility, or pitcher, it slated everybody down. And Jack Caglione is not an all-SEC pitcher, don't get me wrong. But I'm saying that he could have been nominated somewhere else. So those are two of the ones that I'm kind of looking at. The other snub, if you will, is A.J. Causey. A.J. Causey, one of the few pitchers in the Southeastern Conference this year that had double-digit wins. He's got a 10-3 record on the season. He had that little spurt when he was filling in for A.J. Russell where he was fantastic as a starter. I think he made 5 or 6 starts. But he ended up getting rocked and shelled for 2 straight weeks, put him back in the bullpen, and he's been fine ever since. But 10-3 record, a really solid ERA, tons of innings pitched. It's just kind of tough for him. Is he a starter? Is he a reliever? Well, if you want to vote a reliever on this team, you're probably looking at saves, right? And so I understand why A.J. Causey didn't make the list, but it stinks because he was so very well deserving. Dean Curley, you knew he was going to be a part of the all-freshman team. Fantastic season, well over I think as the season ended, because he cooled off the last weekend of the regular season, I think his average is 284, but he got 9 home runs, driven in about 40 runs, led Tennessee in stolen bases, although Tennessee didn't run an awful lot. He was 9 of 9. Really, really solid season. And of course, Drew Beam, who was not an all-SEC pitcher this year, he was the SEC Freshman of the Year back in 2022, and I believe a second-team All-SEC pitcher as a true freshman in 2022. Wasn't the SEC pitcher, first-team or second-team pitcher this year, but he was named the Scholar Athlete of the Year award, which is really, really something to be impressed with and proud of. So any way you look at it, it was almost chalk in my opinion. Charlie Condon gets Player of the Year. Hagen Smith gets Pitcher of the Year, which is no shocker whatsoever. The guy from A&M gets Freshman of the Year. Coach of the Year is Kentucky's skipper, which makes a whole lot of sense because Kentucky's had such a great year. I think snub-wise, A.J. Causey has a beef. Nate Snead even has a beef at relief pitcher. I think Billy Amick has a beef there. He should be on one of these rosters. But overall, Tennessee's still very well represented, and that's awesome. Tennessee wins the regular season. Tennessee's the 1 seed heading in the SEC tournament. Tennessee is in national conversation to be the number 1 overall seed, depending on how it plays this week at Hoover. And again, if you are not the number 1 overall seed, it's okay in my opinion, because you're still going to be a top 8 seed and be hosting Supers and most likely Supers, but regionals for sure coming up next weekend. So good showing here for Tennessee, the baseball team. The All-SEC selections were announced, and Tennessee, busy work. Golden Spikes Awards semifinalist list was unveiled at the same time. Great planning, right? On Monday afternoon as well. And what that is the National Player of the Year for the amateur baseball. And Blake Burke and Christian Moore were both named semifinalists. So that's really, really cool too. Credit Tony Vitello and his staff. They just continue to develop winners. And I'm excited to see what this Tennessee baseball team does in postseason play. You don't have to win Hoover. You do not have to win the SEC tournament. This tournament literally doesn't matter for Tennessee. It doesn't. Now, you're not going to go out there and throw the games. You're going to go out there and play. You're going to go out there and compete and try to win, just as you always do. But, Wednesday's game is going to be a bullpen game. I do expect A.J. Russell to pitch in Wednesday's game at this time of this recording. I think the starter for that game could be interesting. I've heard a name on Monday. I'm like, oh, okay. We'll see if it happens, depending on who Tennessee plays. So we'll get all that. And, of course, I'll be in Hoover covering that this weekend at the SEC tournament in Hoover, Alabama. All right. So when we come back, we'll get into your mailbag questions right here on the show. It's your Tuesday Locked On Vols. Stay tuned. We'll come back and answer those questions. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts all in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis that you tend to in your entire portfolio with confidence. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising costs of inflation, to pay off debt and your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in your way to financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, to the data, to the tools you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You think you've saved, you think you've researched, you think you've invested, you've done all that you can do. Now you need to take those investments at the next level by using what every financial great uses in Yahoo Finance. More than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you the tools and data you need all in one place. So, with a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For a comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investment. Let me try that again. For the comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor at yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That is yahoofinance.com. Your mailbag questions coming up next here on a Tuesday Locked On Vols. Okay, you everydayers, right now is the time when you take over the show. Not a whole lot time-wise left in the show, and it's probably good because we didn't have too many questions here today. That's okay. You guys know it's every Tuesday. You can always send in your questions. Let's go to Noah. This is from the YouTube channel. I know it's too early to have a good idea, but just for fun, who do you think gets drafted higher, Nico or Pierce? Of course, that's Nico Iamaleava and James Pierce. Good question. Right now, it would be silly not to say James Pierce. And, of course, you got a whole season left to play, and I understand the hypes and everything. Remember, Will Levis talking about the number one overall seed, our number one overall pick, like in May before his last year at Kentucky, and he went on the slide to the second round. But he was still getting talked about like he was going to be the fourth overall pick in that draft. Drake May, Caleb Williams, some names last year that were being talked about, and both of those guys did pretty well, early round picks as well. So right now, James Pierce, that's him. He's the cream of the crop. Max Chadwick over at Pro Football Focus, he's going to be on the show later this week, mind you, and he loves James Pierce, thinks he can be the number one overall pick next year. And so right now, I will say James Pierce, but maybe if James Pierce, plays well, but he's taken, 8th or 9th overall, or maybe sometime in the first round, Nico, who's got 2 more full seasons left before he's draft eligible, and he's a quarterback, maybe he can slide up even higher in the first round if he is who we think that he is. And so, good question. Right now, I'll say James Pierce because James Pierce has more solid foundation to stand on because, Nico just hadn't played enough yet. But I think they're both going to be very, very high draft picks, respectively, in the NFL Draft 2025 and I guess the NFL Draft for 2027. Would that be right? Would that be after Nico's junior year? Yeah, something like that. All right, let's go to Mr. Omega. How long until someone comes along and throws a pile of money at Danny White, or for the matter, some of these coaches? Yeah, I was talking on Nashville radio Monday morning, and they asked me, how worried should Tennessee fans be about, teams trying to come and get Tony Vitello? And I was like, just like Tennessee fans, when something great is going on right now, to worry about something. But that's just the fact of the matter. There's been talk about that. Texas, there's been talk about how they might take a swing at Tony Vitello, and teams like that got financial resources in today's climate with name, image, and likeness. It is appealing. For sure. It's very appealing. Tony Vitello is being very well compensated here at Tennessee, that's for sure. But there's always more money. Somebody can always come in and pay more money. Tony Vitello, just for instance, and again, we'll see how things go on. I think he loves it here. He literally has built this program back up with his own 2 hands, okay? Not built this program because there's been success in the past, but built it back. And Tennessee's got a $95 million renovation project that's going to be completed by the time opening day is next year because of Tony Vitello. I think Tony Vitello really, really enjoys it here. But Josh Heupel, look what he's doing. We'll see what Kim Caldwell does. We'll see what some of these, these other, Rick Barnes, of course, we know UCLA took a huge swing at him a couple years ago. And then some of these coaches for the non-revenue sports. When you have success and when you're winning at a high clip, it's going to attract people to come and try to take away what's yours, right? And so what do? You renegotiate. And Tony Vitello's even already, in contract talks a little bit with Tennessee in the early stages to get an extension. You reward them with financial means. But as long as you're winning, you're doing something right. So, even for Danny White, that'd be a little interesting because, again, people can always pay you more money, but like for Danny White to leave, like, why would you leave? You're at a Power 5 program in the Southeastern Conference. Why would you ever want to leave? Unless you were fired, why would you ever want to leave on your own accord to go somewhere else? It'd be a lateral move at minimum, right? There is no higher ceiling for where Danny White is right now in this arena. So a good question, but and it's relevant too because when you're doing something right, people want to come and take what's yours. But at least I haven't heard anything in terms of any head coaching moves or Danny White in that regard. Let's go to Braden. Braden's got a really good question I'm going to save because I'm going to do a segment on that at some point in the near future. Who is your Mount Rushmore of villains for Tennessee football? It's a good question. In fact, you listening right now and watching, Braden's question here. I want you guys to give me your villains, your top 4 villains, Mount Rushmore villains for Tennessee football in years past. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and I'll share some of mine, and we'll come together and we'll do that segment here at some point this week or maybe next week. Braden's other question says, if you could sit down and have an adult beverage with any Tennessee legend, who would it be? Good question. We've talked about this before in various other, variations of this question. It's hard not for me and my demographic. It's hard not for me to sit there and say anybody but Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning is doing so well in life post-football. Such a great ambassador for the University of Tennessee, NFL Hall of Fame quarterback, college football Hall of Fame quarterback. I would love to go to Saloon 16 down there on the Strip and now on Cumberland Avenue, the bar that he owns, and have a Budweiser with him. I think that's what he said after one of his football wins. I'm going to go home and drink a Budweiser or something. It's hard for me to say anybody but Peyton Manning, but I would love to talk with Eric Berry. Would love to talk with I've spoken a little bit with Chris Lofton, but I like to talk with Chris Lofton, more in depth. I think that'd be a fun conversation to have. There's so many out there, but Peyton Manning would be the easy answer for me. Hope that answers your question. Let's go to got a couple more here as we end our show. Let's go to Rob. First, do you think Semo and Blake Burke land on the where do you think Semo and Blake Burke land on the all-time Tennessee baseball players list? And are their numbers going to be retired? Are they at that level? Well, funny thing about it is Christian Moore's jersey number 1, is already quote-unquote retired, right? Condrich wore that. Condrich was number 1 way back in the day. I can say with Tennessee's new jerseys coming next year, that number 1 will be taken out of circulation officially. It's kind of something weird. I don't know, like the number's retired, but they've still been allowing people to wear it. It doesn't make much sense. But the number 1 after this year, to my knowledge, won't be worn anymore in a routine basis because you're getting a new shipment of jerseys and they're taking that number 1 out of circulation. As far as Blake Burke, I don't think so. Burke has been such a great player here at Tennessee, but when it's all said and done, I don't think that he's going to hold any records at Tennessee. And to this point, you haven't won a national championship. Now, to be continued for this year. We'll see how they finish, but I would say probably no on the jersey for Blake Burke. But Semo and Blake Burke, two of the best all time here in program history for sure. The single season home run list, the career home run list, the doubles, the extra base hits for Burke, they're going to be up there. And Semo's going to be an All-American, and we'll see what Blake Burke does with some more postseason recognition. But they're going to be up there. Second, what do you think this baseball team has to do better to make a serious run at a national championship this year? It's still my same answer, right? It's still pitching. Sure, teams go through ups and downs hitting. That's baseball. My biggest question mark about this team in preseason, midseason, and now is still pitching depth. Tennessee, if you go down a game in regional play, do you have enough arms to come back and win that Monday game? As the season's gone along, I feel so much better about these arms. So is it perfect or where you'd want it to be? No. But is it good enough? In my opinion, yes. And you're about to get A.J. Russell back. We'll see what he looks like Wednesday in Hoover. So my answer remains. You got to be able to pitch. Pitch. You got to be able to pitch, have options who can give you some innings on the mound. And then finally, we'll go to Trey here to end the show. Trey says, transfer portal being crazy. When it comes to situations like Chaz Lanier, where you are all in on one guy. If the portal player doesn't go your way late, does your focus shift to getting another late summer pickup? How much pressure does that put on the coaching staff? Focus. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get anybody else in the portal. If Chaz Lanier goes to Kentucky or to BYU or wherever, you're not going to get anybody in the portal, in my opinion. You might can get a late summer freshman to come in, just like Zakai Ziegler was. They signed Zakai Ziegler in August before his freshman year. You can get something else like that because you got a couple of spots still remaining. But in terms of the portal, if I'm not mistaken, and things can always change, I think that Tennessee will be pretty much done. We'll see what happens. I mean, Tennessee's going to try to bring him in. They view him as the last missing piece. They think he wants to be here. We'll see if they can get to the finish line and what that takes. And then, if he is here, how he kind of comes in and adjusts to the culture here at Tennessee. But I'll say this, Rick Barnes won't take anybody that's not a culture fit, in my opinion. So we'll see how that plans out. As of the time of this recording, Chaz Lanier's still scheduled to be on campus on Tuesday. We'll see if that happens as expected and see what happens from there. All right, that is going to do it here for this edition of Locked On Vols. Can't thank you enough for joining us here, making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch. I appreciate you guys for sending in those mailbag questions. On Braden's question, let me know your top 4 villains, your Mount Rushmore villains for Tennessee football throughout its history. I would love to do a segment on that coming up later in the week. And I've got a couple of good ones that I've already been thinking about, so we'll get to that later in the week. We got Max Chadwick coming up later in the week, Pro Football Focus, Josh Ward for Ward Wednesday, all that and more, and Tennessee from Hoover, Tennessee baseball team, latest in Tennessee basketball, Chaz Lanier, everything you could possibly want, 30 minutes or 35 minutes right here on Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys as always, and we will do it again on Wednesday. This is Locked On Vols.